Welcome to the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance. I'm your host, Eric Smith. On today's episode, we're joined by Paul Shirley, former Iowa State Cyclone basketball player turned author. He shares his journey as a professional basketball player across the NBA and overseas, his transition into writing, and how his work today helps individuals and teams build better habits, find focus, and create more meaningful work. This episode is presented by Flynn Wright, Iowa's premier full-service advertising agency, serving clients from coast to coast for over 40 years. Experts in crafting stories that sell, Flynn Wright prides itself on helping brands drive performance and stay one step ahead. Paul Shirley, thank you for being on this episode of the Area Podcast. How are you?
I am keeping it between the ditches.
That's all you can do.
That's all you can do.
I'm going to tell you this, though. I didn't anticipate starting this way, but every time I leave my wife's uncle, who is actually coming into town this weekend, every time we leave each other, we say, goodbye, and he says, keep her between the ditches.
Does he
Literally
really?
Every time.
Oh, amazing! I've been trying this out because it's very Kansas of me. I didn't know it was Iowa. Also, there's a barista at this coffee shop I go to who, when I ask her how she's doing, she says upright and not crying. And I like that too.
Okay, I might implement that one as well too.
Put that one in the bank.
Well, for anyone listening, if you are a Cyclone basketball fan, you certainly recognize the name Paul Shirley, former Iowa State University Cyclone basketball player. We're going to talk about some of that. Now author and many other things. We were just talking. You do a lot of these podcasts as well.
I do a bit of podcasting, which has its ups and downs, as you know. It's interesting. Like, I've noticed about myself, I don't know if you feel this way, I get into certain kind of themes based on like what I'm reading, what I'm thinking about. And one thing that happens is you might say the same kinds of things on a series of podcasts, but they're all aimed in different directions. But then you feel crazy because you keep saying the same kind of thing. This has been very true of promoting books also. Like you get into this, here's the patter of what people want to talk about this particular book. But you are going through the experience of doing it multiple times, but each time to them it's new. When I was doing stuff, we'll talk about my oldest book here in a second, I know. That book involved a lot of promotion on sports radio.
Oh, okay.
And so I would be on the phone and, my whatever agent or the publishing house had set up 8 or 10 of those in a day.
Yeah.
And it'd be, it's Bob and Bear in the morning, and we're here with funny man Paul Shirley. And then you'd only have like 3 minutes, and it needed to be really pithy. So I started being able to come up with like, what's a story I can tell about what's it really like to play professional basketball that lasts 1 minute, right? Which is very different from a podcast pace, right? So like, anyway, I think that's just like an interesting aspect of the podcasting realm is you hear these people on various things and they end up saying kind of the same thing in different places.
Yeah, it is bizarre. Well, I mean, do you get back to Ames a lot?
I'm in Iowa. Yeah, I'm in Iowa basically once a month now, which has been very different from the past. So it feels to me like enough time has passed since I was at Iowa State that I can be here and it doesn't feel like I'm holding on to the glory days. When I would come back soon after college, it always there was that sense of like, is he clinging to his past glory, which felt a little uncomfortable?
Yeah, I could see that.
Now I'm old enough where nobody cares.
Well, let's get into that a little bit, and certainly we're going to get right into the first book as well. But, you played for the Cyclones, and, you were a multi-year starter, originally from Kansas, or did you come from Kansas to Ames? Mm-hmm. And you were on some of the sweet teams of right around 2000. So Coach Tim Floyd, then later Larry Eustace, you're playing with Jamal Tinsley, Marcus Fizer. This was the glory team until probably, really recently as well with some great success under TJ. But, what was it like being in Ames, playing for the Cyclones, you playing basketball at that time?
I think I was actually just talking to some of the basketball people about this. Our time had a certain soap operatic quality to it, in that there was the big debate about, is Tim Floyd going to stay or leave? And he ended up leaving to play for the Chicago Bulls. We had players who were kind of unlike players who had been here in the past in Jamal Tinsley and Marcus Fizer. I think Marcus was Iowa State's first McDonald's All-American. So there was that sense. We compared it to the early days of a startup where it's the fun time. Nobody knows quite what's going to happen at Google or Uber or whatever. And now that business has matured, right? And now at Iowa State, it's much more, just like with any college, it's much more transactional. And I'm not sure the fans have quite the same emotional connection as they did back then when there were more storylines to connect to and less money to connect to.
What was it like, for you in basketball? Because, you did your time, or you did the several years here at Iowa State.
Did my time. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. Yeah. It felt that way sometimes.
I bet it did. But then you transitioned and aspired to be a professional athlete, which is chronicled in your 2007 book, Can I Keep My Jersey? And I like the subtitle to the book. It's 11 teams, 5 countries, in 4 years. I'm using it here as a prop, but I have read it, and it's hilarious, quite honestly. The ups and downs of trying to make it in professional sports.
And strange for me to look back because I ended up playing for 17 teams and I played for basically 10 years. That book came out in the middle of my career.
Oh, really?
Which
Okay.
Is pretty weird, right? When you think on it, like, why didn't I just wait till my career was done? But that, I think it added a certain visceral quality that I wouldn't have been able to articulate back then, but felt really immediate to people because I was still in it. You know, the book came out probably 2 years after I had played for the Phoenix Suns and written a blog for them. So it was in the midst of still trying to be a basketball player, which was both good and bad, right? It did lend that immediacy, but it also, in some ways, submarined the rest of my career because then I became known as the guy who's going to write about whatever happens here on this basketball team.
You're saying that impacted you negatively?
It definitely impacted me negatively in the NBA. Like, my agent was like, dude, you're not good enough for any team to take a chance on you now. Like, you were good enough to be a marginal NBA player, but now they don't care. So it kind of meant that I was going to finish my career in Europe, which was fine.
Yeah. Some of the interesting things, and as you read through the book, it was, in many ways, it was very cyclical where you'd get put on a 10-day contract, or your agent would call and say they're interested in this because somebody, got injured. And there was all these, really many ups and downs where you were really excited to pursue this, but then there was many unknowns and all the variables weren't in your control. Mm-hmm. Emotionally, how tough was that?
It was tough enough to provoke several near breakdowns where I would realize, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've kind of done it to myself again. As a basketball player, I was probably a diagnosable workaholic from about the age of 17 to 24. As people who have paid attention to me might know, I was playing for the Chicago Bulls, had my kidney and spleen ruptured and almost died. And that was a big wake-up call on, I'm kind of doing this all wrong. And had that happen a couple of times in my basketball career where I got so wrapped up in controlling outcomes and forgot why I did the thing in the first place. And interestingly, at least to me, I recently figured out that I've done that again, right? Like, in my business life, I have basically put aside all emotion in pursuit of a thing that I thought I could control. And it's only been the last 4 or 5 months where I've really had to reckon with this yet again. I seem to have this tendency of kind of obsessing about something and putting everything to the side for the sake of this career, which was basketball, and then it was writing, and then now it's running a business. And it's maybe my fatal flaw, which I will have to, like they say karmically, that you are sent the same battle over and over again until you solve it. And it seems like that's going to be my battle, is figuring out how to stay between that obsession and some degree of letting control.
Is it also the thing, though, that has allowed you to be successful? And the first book, and we'll talk about it as it's really funny and fun to read, mm-hmm. but the reality is that you're a successful professional athlete. Regardless of teams or years, it
worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
You're
successful.
I had a girlfriend in LA who we had dated for several months, and then one day she came to me and was like, "Oh my God, there's only like 300 guys in the NBA, and you were one of those guys." I'm like, Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. Like
It's
it's
a
hard
huge
to
deal.
get from gravel driveway in Meriden, Kansas to the NBA. And I wrestle with that a lot. Like, was it that drive that got me there, or did I actually hold myself back because of a bit of fear? And I would argue that we want to believe, and I think it is easier to err on the side of there's this term grinding. We think in terms of grinding, right? But what I found in my career was I was actually better than I thought. The reason I thought I had to work so hard was actually because of a kind of scarcity mindset where I was constantly afraid that I wasn't doing enough. And I was driven by a fear of failure. When I got to this pursuit of greatness or presence or whatever you want to call it, which I actually kind of argue is a little bit the discussion of living out of love versus living out of fear, I was much better. So I became a better basketball player when I stopped being afraid of failure, when I stopped trying to do it for outside reasons, and I got back to the thing that had made me great in the first place, which was when I was a high school basketball player, I loved every day of practice because I enjoyed my teammates, I enjoyed being on the court, I enjoyed being fully present in the game. I also enjoyed being a weirdo. Like I definitely led the team in technical fouls. I loved to block a shot and then scream at the guy, right? I loved to dunk and then point at the opposing crowd. I was kind of a maniac. But when I came to Iowa State, I felt like I needed to subsume some of that personality in order to make it here, which, we all balance these things. I felt like I need to be the good kid that everybody can sort of count on. I was the academic All-American and the guy who came on the academic scholarship. So I felt like I had that role to play. And maybe that was right, maybe that was wrong, I don't know. But when I got to be a pro and realized, I can do this however I want, I actually bloomed into a much better basketball player. And so that's a tricky bit of coming back to Iowa State. I was on some really great teams, maybe the best in school history. And I was a good basketball player, but I was not great. It wasn't like they were giving me the ball and saying, get out of the way, let Shirley do what he's going to do. And so I sometimes feel sheepish about the level of basketball player I was here at Iowa State. And then I still feel a little sheepish about the fact that I only played in a few NBA games, right? What people didn't get to see was me playing overseas or me in the minors, where I got back to being that high school basketball player who didn't give a shit and would just do whatever, right? And that was actually the purer incarnation of how I played basketball, and it's the purer incarnation of my personality as a whole. And I'm finding that the more I can get back to that, the better for business, writing, being a person in general.
Well, I do think that, people are hardwired in certain ways. And I feel like in some ways that's what you're talking about. You recently posted something on your social media that resonated with me, and I'll let you respond to it when you wrote it.
This will be very postmodern. So you wrote this thing, now respond to it.
Someone appears to be a natural only because you didn't witness the struggles that got them where they are now. And I just found it to be super interesting that, you're a tall guy. You can't aspire to be tall. You just become tall. And I think there's probably this inclination for some people to be like, well, of course he's going to be good at basketball, without seeing all of the routine and the hustle and the dedication and all those things. And you can apply that concept to nearly every profession as well.
Right. And height is interesting to me because I fell in love with basketball when I was, call it 13 or 14. When I was a high school freshman, I was the point guard on our team. I was 5'11". I weighed 120 pounds. You would not have thought to yourself, that guy's going to play professional basketball someday. However, and so yes, I was fortunate for basketball to grow into a size that allowed me to play professionally. However, I was actually undersized my whole career. I'm too thin. I'm not quite tall enough to be one sort of player. I'm not quite fast enough to be another sort of player. My first love was baseball. And so I contend that if the thing that had tripped my trigger had actually been baseball and I had stayed maybe 6'3" or something, I probably would have played professional baseball. So it was more that I recognized the right path for me and had very little to do with my height, right? Like, yes, that did benefit me. Yeah. in my case, and in the cases of most professional athletes, what I would say is you have to have the physical tools, of course, whatever the sport is, but you also have to have a screw loose enough to think that you can do it, right? So people don't really like when I say this, but when I was 14, 15, 16, I already knew I will be good enough to play professional basketball. But you wouldn't have noticed that based on my body type. You wouldn't have thought like, oh, he'll grow to be 6'9", and weigh 220 pounds and have a 30-inch vertical. Like that, you just wouldn't have known that, right? But you do have to have that ingredient of a little bit of insanity in order to get there. So yes, you have to have, just like anything, like if you're running a business and you don't have any business acumen, that's probably not going to go well. But you also have to have the people skills to be able to be out in the world talking to humans. So it's rarely that one thing will get you there. And back to the request for me to react to my own post. I think a lot about how basketball, business, writing, whatever, there's a finished product that people see, right? And then they often don't want to know about all of the stuff that went into it because they kind of want to believe that it was just easy for you, in large part because that takes the onus off of them. Because if they can pretend that the only reason I played professional basketball is because I'm 6'9", then it takes the blame off of them for not ever doing the thing that they dreamed about. So they can say, well, yeah, you did that, but only because of this. Yeah. They don't want to know about all of the stuff that went into it. In the same way that a business person or a writer, they want to think, oh, well, that person's just naturally talented at writing. They don't want to know about the hours and hours that went into it, the regularity, the systems that you built, the hardship that went along the way. So I work with a guy in Cumming, Iowa, who runs a company called People's Company named Steve Brewer. He's been building that company for 22 years now, something like that. And that has, as he will say, led to a lot of brain damage to him. Now, what people see out of Steve is a pretty gregarious and magnanimous guy who's out in the world making deals and selling farmland. What they don't see is the Sundays that he's in at the office and the long conversations. And they kind of don't want to know about that. That's the reality of it, because that would mean that they would have to look in the mirror and realize, like, uh-oh, I don't actually want this thing as much as I say I want this thing. Because what it takes is, and again, it's not always about quantity of effort. It's more about building systems that are sustainable over time. People also don't want to think about that because they think, you see this a lot with creatives, wannabe creatives actually, where they will think, oh, I will just wait until the spirit moves me and then I'll draw or I'll paint or I'll write, whatever it is. They don't want to know about how every artist you've ever admired has a system. It may be a weird system. It may be Hunter S. Thompson's system of like, I do a bunch of drugs and I stay up till 3 a.m. I don't get up till 11, but that's when I write. But there's a system almost always. Oh, yeah. And that's hard for people to reconcile because a lot of times that means there's no excuse for them. And that hurts our brains. Nobody likes cognitive dissonance. And when you get that sense of, oh, I actually could do something great, I'm just not willing to do it, people don't like living in that space.
Well, I love how, and reading your stuff resonates with me so much because you do pair, you talk about the creative process and how it requires routine. And really, if I can paraphrase everything that you just said, I am hearing it, and I consider myself a creative person. Yet it is effort every single day and routine and structure, and you just have to just keep doing it. And so when I read all of your stuff, I'm like, amen. Like it is work.
Well, it's work. It's also, though, highly achievable. That's the thing that I want to express throughout my life, my career, wherever that takes me, is that this stuff can be demystified, right? So a thing I see a lot is somebody will say, I would love to start a business, write a book, work on this PowerPoint, whatever the thing is. And I got to buckle down and do it. I'm like, that's not going to work very well, right? Like the idea of, I just got to force myself to do it. Not great. How can you make it into something that is fun so that you, as I often say, and smarter people than we have talked about, fall in love with the process, right? So this morning's a great example. I got in yesterday from Denver, was at the hotel and had to get up and get my writing done. I'm working on a different book now. I went to, it's either Bar Tosca or La Tosca or Tosca. I don't know. There's several names that it has had in the time that I've been alive. And so I went there to do my writing. Now, why did I do that? Well, because my reward for writing is that I get to have coffee in the morning, right? I also really love being in coffee shops and just seeing people and being around that energy. If I had tried to do that in my hotel room, no chance. Like I've had published 6 books, right? But even guy who knows how to write, if you made me do that in my hotel room, I would blow my brains out. So it's not about just like gutting your way through. It's figuring out, what do I like about this? How can I build it in a sustainable way so that it is on some level fun for me? Because like you said, it's still going to be work. I still sat down at those words and thought, I don't know how to do this. I'm an idiot. What am I doing? Right? Like there's still that self-doubt, what Stephen Pressfield calls the resistance, right? Which is it's our brain saying you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, whatever these things are. That's why we need those systems. That's why I needed to have a free throw routine when I was a college basketball player, professional basketball player, because if I had just walked up there every time and been like, well, let's see, how should I shoot a free throw in front of 16,000 people at the University of Kansas, it would have gone poorly because I needed that routine. I needed something that calmed my nervous system such that I could concentrate in that moment.
So you talk about loving the process and 100% agree with it. You have to love the process. You love the end result too. Does that fill your bucket? I mean, like seeing this on the table, when the one that you're working on now, you're going to have that on the table as well. And you're like, all right, here it is.
That's a good question because I think what I value in terms of my why is sorting my own brain and then helping other people sort their brains. So it is the result in the sense that you got to take in that book, right? And it maybe made you laugh, or it maybe made you feel connected to me as a person. It's maybe not the book itself, but that ultimate why or value system around, I like connecting to people. I like personal improvement. I like the fact that I'm a better writer than when I wrote that book. So yes, to loving the result in a way, but this is another thing people don't like to hear. They love, in basketball, we would say after a bad game, we're going to throw away the tape of that game. We're not going to watch it. It's about tomorrow, right? That's kind of like junior varsity version of falling in love with the process. The varsity version is we just beat somebody by 20 and we're going to burn that tape because we have to fall in love with the process again tomorrow, right? So that's what a struggle that we all have is thinking we're going to celebrate a result and stay in that mode of celebration for too long, forgetting that the real test is even though the book came out today, I still have to get up tomorrow and work on 40 minutes on the next book, right? Or we had a big sale, but we really can't control a sale at a company, whatever. What we can control is like, do we send 5 more emails tomorrow and the next day and the next day? So I think it's finding the celebration in the day-to-day and forgetting about celebrating too much around the big wins.
When you wrap something up, does your mind instantly turn to the next thing?
Well, it turns to the next. In my world of books and consulting and all of this and business stuff, the next thing is already pretty programmed, right? Like I already know what I'm going to do ahead of time. Yeah. But in a way, yes, and not because I'm trying to downplay my own accomplishments, but because I know that my brain is a mess. This is also relevant, right? Like my brain is not the best brain. It needs constant maintenance. And one of my bits of maintenance is building systems so that I know, hey, look, all you have to do is get to the coffee shop tomorrow and work on your pages of writing. Whether you through an amazing, the last book that I had come out, The Art of Focused Work, we did the Ames launch party at Sweet Caroline's, right? So I was walking past that today coming here and I was thinking like, oh, what was that day like? I don't really remember the end of that night, but the end of that night is kind of anticlimactic no matter what. And so then I probably went back to the hotel room and was alone and was a little bit sad. Like, why don't I have a girlfriend? Like, what's wrong with me? So I've gone high from book celebration to low of loneliness and just the come down. So then I can count on, well, tomorrow I'm going to get up and still go to the coffee shop, right? So it's also seeing that those of us who have these brains, which is a lot of us, where we need, some degree of like regulation, that these systems also they help with that too, right?
This episode of the Area Podcast is sponsored by...
You have a story to tell. That story has a job to do, to be seen, to be heard, to sell, to find inspiration and insight, to use persuasion to change behavior, to turn strategy into tactics, tactics into action, to sell. Nobody does that better than Flynn Wright.
At Northcrest Community, we've made a lot of changes in the last 60 years, but the best things have remained the same. I'm Dawn Borwig, CEO of Northcrest, and I want to tell you why. When you choose Northcrest, you're beginning a new stage of fulfilling, worry-free living. Say goodbye to the burden of home maintenance and hello to an active, engaged community. As the only nonprofit, locally owned and operated community in Ames, we guarantee you a home and our care for the rest of your life. When your needs change, you stay right here, in your community, near your friends and your family. At Northcrest, no one is ever asked to leave because of a lack of funds. That's our nonprofit mission. That's the Life Care Promise. Our residents will tell you, don't wait, don't put it off. Come enjoy all the benefits Northcrest Living has to offer. To learn more, visit our website at northcrestcommunity.org or call to schedule your tour with Kimberly today.
Just south of Iowa State University, in the heart of the Midwest, sits the Iowa State University Research Park, 550 acres of opportunity and innovation. With over 1 million square feet of developed space, it's home to more than 145 tenant companies, from startups to global leaders. Discover innovation hubs, collaborative spaces, and a community that's shaping the future. Whether you're scaling up or starting fresh, ISU Research Park has room to grow. Visit isupark.org to learn more.
So in a bit of timeliness, straight from recording this episode, I am going to go work with Iowa State Athletics and talk with some Iowa State Cyclone football players, essentially about life after football. And you've lived this. I mean, you did the professional basketball job for 10 years, and, you were writing in between. Did you know at the time that you were setting up your next career at that time?
Not really. I think it is worth noting, because I've had to make sense of this too. In some ways, I was a pro from about age 17 to 34, right? So end of high school, you're basically a professional basketball player, whether people want to call you that or not. Now we are aware that a college basketball player is effectively a professional basketball player. And then there was also the kind of come down from being a professional basketball player, which took a couple of years of therapy for me. And that's a long enough period. By the time I was 35, basically half my life had been as a professional athlete. So yes, I knew that something had to come after. But no, I did not know how long it would take to make sense of that. That's an internal battle for me, even now, right? I did this thing for, call it 17 years. It's actually only been 13 years since that's over, right? So it makes sense that I'm still kind of finding my way. And that's hard, I think, for athletes to deal with, because it's sort of like they say that if you're in a long relationship, the amount of time that it takes to deal with the end of that relationship is directly related to the length of the relationship.
Oh, I could see that.
That's really similar with sports, right? Because you've wired your brain around self-worth related to I'm a basketball player, I'm a football player, whatever it is. You're having to undo that and also find the next thing, while also trying to get rid of some of the more malevolent aspects of why you tied your self-esteem to that one thing, which is a bit of a hornet's nest. And so I think, yes, I knew and people know that the end is coming, but we don't know how much of a moving target that is to deal with.
Is it tough to come to that realization on the next step?
That it's over, or
but you could apply that. I mean, for athletes, it's athletes, but there are other professions where it's just like there's going to be a natural end, and you have to pivot and launch the next thing.
I've been thinking a lot about what a gift that was, because I had to run an entire life by the time I was 35, and it was basically like I died. Really, because think about how my profession was dependent on my physical ability, right? So suddenly I was worthless because my body wouldn't work as well, which is a lot like death, right? It's sort of like being a model, right? Like that's probably the best example. Kind of like being a musician, although they can do it for a lot longer in some cases. And so that gave me this gift of being able to like observe an entire lifespan and see kind of the arc of the end being physical decrepitude, which is much like real life. And that is then a chance for rebirth, and also the appreciation of like, oh, I get to do other stuff now, which is kind of nice.
I bet that could be liberating.
Yeah, it is. It is when you frame it the right way. I have struggled with it too, because it's depressing. In some ways it makes you feel really old. So I feel both old and hyper young at the same time, which is hard for people to understand.
So you started the process, and you're helping people build systems to make them more effective at their jobs, happier in their lives. We've talked about this some already. What I find interesting about this is that it's a great mix between creative, but like you also have a degree from Iowa State in mechanical engineering, which without really analyzing it, feels like the exact opposite of being creative, and yet you've paired the two together.
It is sort of. So first of all, I didn't know what to do when I came to college for a major, and I'd had a physics teacher who was like, you should get an engineering degree. And I was like, what do they do? And he's like, I have no idea, but you should do that. So I did it. And what engineering teaches you is problem solving, and creativity is really just problem solving. So it's actually more applicable than we realize. I think everyone should get an engineering degree because it teaches you problem solving. If you think about the word creativity, right? Like what are we doing? We're creating something. In reality, the only reason we have to create something is because we've been forced to deal with a problem. We have to reckon with like, oh, we've got to change course. I need to create a piece of writing or the aforementioned PowerPoint or whatever it is. And what engineering does is teach you to figure out like, well, what are my constraints? Like, and then how can I solve this problem within those constraints? I sometimes use the example of I had a writing job for El País, which is a Spanish newspaper, where each week I had to turn in a column that was 500 words long, almost exactly because it was going to be in print, right? It was a weekly thing about the NBA. It needed to be funny. It needed to be me making some point that nobody had made before, right? So those are my constraints. And so, and it was also, I'm writing in English, they're translating it to Spanish. So I can't use super complicated phrasing or it's not going to translate very well. So those constraints force me to create a solution, right? Which is it's the finished product isn't really the words, the finished product is the feeling that you get, right? So I'm trying to create a solution for how do I express what's in my brain and get it into your brain. And that's really just what engineering is too, in that we have like, well, we've got to get people from here to there. Should we build a car? Should we build a train? Like what's the thing? So in a lot of ways, even though I've never worked as an engineer, I've worked as an engineer basically my whole life.
So, like, are deadlines sort of like the same thing?
Exactly. So that job with El País, I had to turn that in Thursday at noon, right? So I knew that that's my hard deadline, another constraint. So I've got these constraints, and now I need to operate within them, which is what creativity is. Yeah. It's actually not creative if you don't have any constraints, because you don't have to create a new solution. Like if we didn't know, this is very abstract, but imagine if you were doing a painting and you didn't have a canvas. You're just like, well, you could paint it anywhere. You're like, Jesus, how would I solve that problem, right? So in any situation, we have constraints. We can work within them. My constraints are this canvas is 11 by 17. I've got these colors of paint, and I've got this much time to do it. Those are all constraints that force us to be creative, which is that whole like Jocko Willink idea of discipline equals freedom. It's the same with like creativity is driven through constraints, which people don't like. Again, they want to believe like I can exist in chaos, but you can't. Like you need these constraints, and they actually force more creativity because you're having to overcome them. Like if somebody said to us, build a boat with the stuff that's in this room, we would have to get hyper creative because we don't have much except for this table that looks like a boat.
What's that scene from Apollo 13 where they had to retrofit all the stuff that's on the
exactly
on the ship?
Yeah, so like it's actually true that like the more constraints you have, the more creative you have to be. So, and that fits with a thing I'm seeing in the world. We have so much abundance and so much comfort and so much complacency because we actually have too much. We actually need fewer things in order to be forced to be creative.
Well, I'll give you another example. So I've been in this role nearly 4 years now, and nearly immediately I brought to the team, I said, well, we should do a print publication, of which I do mostly by myself. And what's interesting is we do it 4 times a year. So as soon as I get 24 pages done, it's off to print, and then I get it in my hand. Well, now suddenly I have about 2 months to fill the next 24 pages. So it's this system of you have to, it has to get filled. And so there's this process of pursuing stories, writing stories, doing the photography, doing the layout. And that's the creative part that I really love. But it would be so easy to, well, it took me 5 months to get the next one.
It matters that you brought that up because a lot of my world now in consulting is working with people on how they work. The reason that matters is because for about 10,000 years, we worked one way, which was, okay, we're going to go out and plow that field until the day is done, and then we know that we're done, right? Most of the work that people are doing now, not entirely, because there's still plenty of people doing physical labor, is knowledge work that is very project-based, and that project-based work is hyper-abstract. They don't actually have constraints, and this is what haunts them, right, is that they don't have constraints. If you and I were working at the Goodyear plant in North Topeka, where I grew up, we would know we go in at 8 and we work for 8 hours on building tires, and then we go home, right? But now, if you worked at Goodyear, probably your job would be like, how can we design a better way to build tires, or how can we source the rubber more effectively, whatever. Yeah. And that is very abstract and hard for people to manage. And it's very new to us, right? So that's what I'm seeing in the world as a whole, and why I'm really excited about this work I'm doing, because people are starving for solutions for how can I manage the abstractness of this work? Just like you said, I've got this thing that's due in 3 months. So how do I break it into bits so that it's not me waiting till the end? Because we do need these constraints. We all need these constraints, but a lot of our lives don't naturally have those constraints anymore. And now we're checking our email at all hours of the day. We should be doing more. We're filled with guilt because we're not doing more. And that makes people crazy. And then they talk to me and I help them get better.
Well, I'll give you one more example, and then I have a question about that. So when we launched this podcast, I said, well, we're going to do, because we have a bunch of other stuff going on, we're going to do 12 in a year. Well, we ended up doing 16 last year, and we're going to do 16 this year. So if I get to the end of the year, everyone can look to see if we did 16 episodes this year. And there's only one way to do it. You can't do them all in November and December. You have to, it's got to be part of the I call it the cadence of our content creation. But for those abstract sort of jobs and roles, are you encouraging people to build those restraints in, and do they need accountability partners? Do they need to articulate it, publicly, or at least to other people on the team?
Yes, to all of those things. So that means,
is that hard for people?
It is.
Now suddenly it's like, now I have to do this.
It's hard, and then it turns out to be a relief. What I've found is that a lot of times people will be reluctant to commit to constraints. Like, again, let's say that for this podcast, you committed to, I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day researching guests, whatever, right? Well,
research.
Yeah, let's imagine that day one. So what will happen with me is I'll tell people, like, let's just try for 3 days this week. You're going to spend 15 minutes, which a lot of times I will phrase, and other people have phrased as a kind of bucket of deep work on this particular task. So I'm like, okay, so when are you going to do this? Where are you going to do it? And then who are you going to tell about it afterwards, right? Like you said, it's nice to have a little bit of social accountability where you could brag to your wife or somebody like, hey, I did this thing. And they can pat you on the back and you'll feel better. What happens a lot of the time is people will come to me and say, oh my God, I felt so good that I just kept going. And I stayed with it for 45 minutes. I'm like, that's worse than if you had done 8 minutes, because now you've broken this promise that you made to your brain. And the next time you sit down, your brain's going to be like, screw you. Last time you said 15 minutes and it turned into 45. I'm not going to do it at all, right? So it's helping people see that it's not just about like doing more. It's about being hyper precise. Like I said I would do 15 minutes. I stopped right at 15 minutes because I know that I'm going to pick it up on Wednesday and do 15 more minutes. And then the next week we can see, do you want to do 20 minutes at a time? Do you actually have more time than you realized? Again, I love this stuff because I'm actually trying to make it more fluid, more elegant for people. But we've been taught through guilt, shame, whatever, that we should always be trying to push ourselves beyond. And I get it, but that doesn't last. That's not sustainable. We want to create like sustainable habits for people so that they can, coming back to what we started with, so that they can fall in love with that day to day and they can count on themselves to know this is how much I do no matter what. I get my, spin drift when I'm done with those 15 minutes. And I've built in that sort of cue reward system so that I can do it day after day, which again is exactly like sports. If you had said to me, Paul, you should probably lift weights for 8 hours one day and then 0 hours the next day and then 6 hours, you'd be like, that's crazy. You should do an hour and 15 minutes every day. And that's what will be sustainable for your body. Our brains are no different, right? There's only so much we can do.
Well, it's like in education as well. They teach teachers, they learn how to break the day up into, like 15-minute segments because students, but you could apply it to almost all learners. There's a cap on when it just becomes less effective on what they're learning. And so even if they are continuing to learn throughout the day, it's broken up. And so you're doing different things, exercising different muscles, thinking about different things.
Totally. And that fits with something I think about a lot because most of the evidence, and you can always find a study to back up anything. So these things are questionable unless I had experienced it firsthand. So most of the evidence is the most somebody can concentrate is about 50 minutes, 50, which is probably why our classes were about 45 or 50 minutes, right? Even within that, though, generally everybody takes a break about every 15 to 20 minutes, which is right around 17 minutes. Now, again, I wouldn't necessarily believe that just on its face, except that I've been running workspaces now for 13 years. And so I have seen just day after day, we run sessions. So they're either 45 minutes long or 90 minutes long. And I've seen day after day in one of those 90-minute sessions, at about 45 minutes, people get up, take a bathroom break, go get coffee, whatever. And within those 45 minutes, about every 15 minutes, we will kind of look around and just check on things. And that is for a very good evolutionary reason, which is that we were not built to sit still, because if we sat still as cave people, we would get eaten, right? So our brains are kind of hyper aware at all times, and that's okay. So we can work within those constraints of knowing like the human brain probably only does about 15 to 20 minutes at a time, and then it takes a little break, and that's cool. That's great. Yeah. You don't have to mess with that, right? Like that's baked into you. But people feel this like weird desire to think that they should be different, that like, oh, well, I can concentrate for 3 hours. Really? So you're telling the former NBA basketball player who's written 6 books that he's wrong about how long people can concentrate? Like, no, yeah, you've probably got it solved. You're right. I'm actually telling you that you can do these amazing things in short little bits, and you're telling me like, no, I actually want to grind myself into dust, even though I have no evidence that works. Like that's the thing that like baffles me, where I'm like, we can get you to the answer, and it will feel fun and elegant and smooth. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do it my way.
So in our organization, we've talked about it on this podcast. We run on EOS, it's Entrepreneurial Operating System. I'm sure there's others as well. But one of the interesting things, and I'm going to read another thing that you wrote, is just it helps develop our structure for the organization, but also we establish what are called rocks. And now I'm going to read something that you had said about there being value in sharing your ambition with others, and how you're really putting, like, if I want to do like this project, I mean, you said today, I'm writing another book, but you had to verbalize that for the first time, for the first book, which probably felt a little weird. On a previous episode of this podcast, we had a guy on, Clayton Mooney. He, for the first time, he didn't told anyone until he was sitting there that he wants to be the fastest person to run across the state of Iowa, and he's going to do it next year, and it's going to take him like 3.5 days. And I'm like, oh, you said that out loud, like that's, and now people are going to hold you to that, which is what he wanted. I mean, he wants that. But talk to me about the value of verbalizing like those aspirations and those ambitions and ideas. And
there's a couple of schools of thought. One is yes to what you're saying, but it doesn't really matter unless you also find somebody to hold you to it. There's also evidence, especially in a social media age, that we get the same serotonin or dopamine boost from telling people we're going to do something that we would if we actually did the thing. So it can also be seductive to start telling people you're going to do a thing because it gives you that same little jolt of hormonal feel good without ever accomplishing the thing. I see this, it's interesting. I haven't put this together in words yet, but when I'm working with people one-on-one or in companies, one thing that is a scare word to me or a scare phrase is, I will try to do that next week, right? Okay, well, what the hell does that mean, right? I will try to do that next week, because that just means that vaguely I have an intention. What I think matters, and this ties back to what you're saying, is I'm going to be the fastest person to run across Iowa, and here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk to 10 friends who are going to help, like, congratulate me or provoke me, whatever the thing is. So I think there's value in articulating these things, but only if we follow up immediately with how, and then actively go out and seek the people who will help us do that how.
Well, and I will share in as far as his situation goes, you can only run across the state of Iowa if you prepare for a year. And this guy's done ultra running, but he's also already started reaching out to people and say, hey, I want you to run with me when I do this next year. And, and he's lining up he's lining up that accountability. Also, he's lining up the motivation that he knows he's going to need to keep going to do all of those things.
It's also, so this is where another thing that people get annoyed by, but which I am doing because I'm rooting for them, is to figure out how to set systems-based goals instead of outcome-based goals, because like that guy can't actually control whether he can be the fastest guy to run across the state of Iowa. In the same way that I couldn't actually control whether I made it to the NBA or not. Like, I would have loved to have been the best basketball player in the history of the world, but there were circumstances that prevented that from happening, whether that was my own failures or just the luck of the draw. So when I was able to get back in basketball to, am I present? Am I getting better? Am I excited about the basketball player I'm becoming? Then great things happened sort of in spite of my own desires for like outcome-based goals. So I always just get really suspicious when people start making very definitive goals of like, we got to have this kind of revenue per month by next year at this time. Like, are you really going to be able to control that? Like, I know it sounds great, but how, what do you know is going to happen to the economy and so on and so forth? Like, what could you do instead that's like, well, by this time next year, I will have emailed 350 people about X, Y, or Z, right? Like, you can control that. And that also that's going to help you feel better no matter what, because you can win at that based on your efforts, not based on what happens through the outside.
Well, what you just said really resonates with me. So, we manage a lot of social media accounts and we do a lot of other communication things. And the thing that I always talk about with either my team or others in our organization or even outside organizations, I always talk about like a cadence. And to me, when I hear you talk about a system, to me it feels like the same thing. Like, we're not just chasing certain metrics and certain numbers because a lot of that is out of our control, but we've built in this is what we do on a weekly basis. This is what it looks like on a monthly or quarterly basis, and we build in how we respond to certain things if they come to us. And so it's building this machine of communications. And I really like the way that you said that, because, I mean, again, it does resonate.
Yes to building the machine. And also yes to understanding that you can tinker with the machine.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the other piece to this is the awareness or drawing awareness to what works and what doesn't. So a micro example to go back to our like 15 minutes a day, 3 times a week on a certain new project. It's also then, and this is where it gets a little bit woo-woo, it is taking a moment at the end of those 15 minutes to recognize how you feel. Like, how do I actually feel about what I just did? Do I feel exhausted? Do I feel inspired? Whatever it might be. Because that's what helps to train our brains over time to figure out, like, is this working? Is it not? Am I exhausted by this? Am I excited by this? Similar in a work system, like these check-ins that are objective and also to some degree pretty emotions based around, like, do we feel like this is right? Because a lot of times the results of the machine that we're building are going to be way far in the future. So we do have to bring that human element back in around, like, does this seem crazy that we're only doing this or that we're doing so much of that, whatever it might be. I am also noodling on this idea, speaking of that, of because of automation, AI, whatever you want to call it, emotional intelligence becomes more and more valuable over time. So it's also having the intuition to know about this machine that we're creating. Like, do we really think that what we're doing is right? You can't do that every day or you go crazy. You have to, like we're saying, you have to stay in love with these systems that you're building, but then also periodically checking in, whether that is daily for your personal or monthly for the professional or the business's goals or systems, making sure that, like, are all of our intuitions aligned that this is headed to the right place, right? Because it's not, we also want to remember, this isn't just about creating something sterile and antiseptic that never changes. It's got to be completely changeable at all times, which is why this stuff is so exciting and fun to me, is because we're like, there's no one answer. It's always going to change based on the humans that are involved, and that's good, and that we don't want to get rid of that. That's what makes us excited to get up each day.
And I have sort of a personal question to see if this has happened to you. You know, as someone who is, you know, you're creating tangible things, whether it be a book, but you're also creating an experience for the people that you're working with. And I have found at times, you know, especially notably in longer term projects, let's say it takes, you know, several months, and probably even longer than that for your book, but for my publication and magazine, like, I just can't crack it. And so I set it aside, you know, and I'm done for the day. And what I always find interesting is it comes back to me, like when I'm out for a walk or sometimes in a dream, you know, like the way I lay out certain pages, or, I should pursue that. It's always sort of back there, even if it's not like right in front of me. I don't know if that ever happens to you.
Well, that's a great point. Yes, of course it happens to me, and it happens to everybody. And that's actually part of the power of these little buckets of time, as opposed to trying to wait for inspiration, right? So the I guess analogy that comes to mind that I've sort of noodled on over time is that, we're going to go back to that 15-minute example. So in that 15 minutes, what you're doing is you are pouring from the reservoir of your brain on that subject for 15 minutes, and then you're turning the spigot back off, and then overnight you're going to let that reservoir rebuild. And those answers that you cannot come to right then are going to reveal themselves the next day without you knowing it. And that's what's so cool about this stuff. So in talking about writing, I was with a friend the other day. He's actually the Paul Shirley of the NFL. His name's Nate Jackson, played for the Broncos, wrote a couple books. And we were commiserating about how when we first started writing, we would take a week in between writing because we were like, well, I don't have time, whatever. But if you're doing it every day, you can get into, especially if you leave yourself a little note about what you're going to do when you pick up, I can now get into writing within 20 seconds, right? Whereas it used to take me 30 minutes to figure out, like, where I was. That, again, is the power of these, like, tiny buckets where it's just like, okay, I'm going to switch on to magazine brain. Switch off. I can trust that that'll come to me. I will solve these problems overnight in the shower or whatever. And now I'm going to switch over to, podcast mode. And I'm going to trust. So again, this is what gets me excited, because then you're relieving people of this idea that they need to sit there for 4 hours, right? Like, that doesn't actually work. I'm not saying it doesn't work because I'm trying to make things like simple for the sake of making them simple. It actually just doesn't work to do 4 hours every Monday on something. What does is just a little bit. Here's a last example. I'm giving a talk here tomorrow night, right? This morning, I was like, I got to spend about 15 minutes on the outline for that talk. I've been thinking about it for quite a while. It actually only took me about 7 minutes because I've been thinking about it so much that it wasn't actually that I needed to take 15 or even 15 minutes or 2 hours, whatever. I've already been doing that work on the plane yesterday, last week when I was thinking about the PowerPoint, whatever. So it's also giving ourselves that gift of trust that like, the outline didn't take me very long because I've been thinking about it, like you said, about the magazine, right?
I always call it marinating. You know, the idea is marinating back there, and it'll come out when it comes out. But again, it's the pairing, understanding that and knowing that it's not pushing it off because you know you're going to have to get to it the next day and the day after that. So it's that combination of balancing the creativity while also you have this established structure to implement it.
Right.
Well, you talked about speaking to here names, and I know one of the topics you're going to talk about, it was resilience. If you want to kind of give us a couple bullet points, you already have given this speech by the time the episode comes out. But
sure. So what I talked about was, I'm not the ultimate authority on resilience, but I certainly have had a fair number of fairly spectacular public failures, which have allowed me to think a lot about this topic. One being, we talked a little bit about having my kidney and spleen ruptured while playing for the Bulls and almost dying. That really tapped me back into my why. So as we discussed, thinking about why am I playing basketball in the first place? Why did I ever get good at this? And why did I let myself subsume that identity or those values in pursuit of other people's satisfaction? I will also have talked about the power of systems in the context of when I was at Iowa State. I'd grown up a huge fan of the University of Kansas. Long story short, Roy Williams told me I was not good enough to play at Kansas. So I came to Iowa State, and we beat Kansas the last 4 times that we played them. And one of those games was at Allen Fieldhouse, and I had to first make a free throw and then miss a free throw with 0.7 seconds left in the game with my mom in the second row and all my friends and family watching and Iowa State fans on the edge of their seats. And so that is resilience in that I had to build the system that allowed me to be able to even stand on the free throw line without peeing my pants, right? And then hopefully make a free throw and miss a free throw. Last is, so Iowa State fans will remember that I was a part of a team that played Michigan State in the Elite Eight when I was a junior, and I was a part of a rather iconic play that resulted in a double foul that made me foul out of the game. It shifted the momentum of the game. Michigan State ended up winning. Larry Eustachy got thrown out of the game. It was a whole thing, and I was left crying on the end of the bench. And when I got to when I got to class on Monday morning, I found that the entire front page of the Iowa State Daily was that picture of me crying, which is mortifying when you're 21 years old and 24,000 people have seen this. But I look back at that as an early lesson in the power of sitting with how much failure hurts, which I don't think we do a very good job of right now, which is this emotional piece of being able to allow that, like, oh yeah, that didn't go very well. I need to now wallow in how much this hurts so that I can then move forward, as opposed to just trying to like stack the next task on top, which I am super guilty of and have been in many parts of my life. But I like that sports, because it's so intense, trains us to feel that pain, which I think we all need when we are trying to build resilience, because we need to be able to deal with failure, move through that emotion, and then pick ourselves back up.
You have a professional win from the last week or two that we haven't talked about yet?
Professional win from the last week or two. You know, we talked about values and noticing why we're good at things or why we do things. It will also have been interesting at this talk because I went through a breakup 4 days ago. So at the talk, I will I will have said, this is an interesting test for me because I'm having to be resilient in this moment, right? And so I came back to Des Moines yesterday, needed to go work with somebody one-on-one. And in that meeting, I was pretty down because the person that broke up with me lives in Iowa, and I wasn't thrilled about coming back to Iowa. But then went to a meeting where I was doing some one-on-one coaching and left that remembering like how much I love what I'm doing and how good I feel at doing it. And that felt like the reminder of what I'm doing is right and I'm good at it, and then the results will sort of carry themselves.
I think it's good to be reminded of that.
Yeah.
Well, that is the process.
Mm-hmm. That's the process. Getting back to not only the doing, but also reminding yourself of why it feels good to do the doing.
Yeah. Well, Paul Shirley, thank you for being on this episode of the Area Podcast. For everyone listening, we would certainly love it if you would subscribe, share it with others. This is the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance. Personal stories, professional journeys.